Hi, I'm Carol Mbaha, and today I'm talking about the SLRMagic 2x Anamorphot. Now, a while back I did a whole bunch of videos entitled STRETCHY about shooting in Anamorphic, which got some pretty cool responses, and the main anamorphic lens that I was talking about in those videos was the SLRMagic 1.33x Anamorphot anamorphic lens. Since then, SLRMagic have come out with a whole bunch of new lenses, and the main big one was the SLRMagic 2x Anamorphot, which is this big barrel over here. Unlike my previous review of the 1.33, I'm not going to go too in-depth about anamorphics themselves. I'm going to assume that you probably already know about anamorphic adapters already and just checking out the 2x Anamorphot. If you are still new to anamorphic adapters and shooting an anamorphic, please check out my previous videos and to give yourself a little refresher. Now, this is the original SLRMagic 1.33x Anamorphot. I've got it here attached to a Carl Zeiss Sienna 50mm 2.8 on a Sony A7S. And, you know, it still works great, and I find it very simple and easy to use. But it's also one of those things where, with the 1.33 stretch, the anamorphic feel of it was subtle. You know, it wasn't obviously noticeable, which is something that when using a 2x, like, speak straight out the bat. So when it comes to the 2x Anamorphot, it feels like they're addressing a bunch of the things that people may have brought up about the 1.33, namely the 2x stretch that really shows off that anamorphic look. Now, the first thing you're going to notice with the SLRMagic 2x is it's big. Like, this is a lot bigger than this bad boy over here. Just putting them side by side, look at that. You know, even if you just compare just the lens themselves, the 2x is pretty much 2x the size of this lens. So as you can see, it's a lot bigger than the 1.33x. It's a lot heavier. And one of the noticeable differences is that instead of using pins to align the lens, it has this push-pull mechanism. So you can pull there, rotate it to the position that you want to align it in, which I think is a much nicer and simpler way of doing it as opposed to the 3 pins, although it doesn't feel as precise sometimes, has to be said. But it's a nice little difference to the 3 pins, and from what I understand, newer versions of the 1.33 Anamorphot have gone away with the 3 pins and used this as well. Another big difference, apart from it being a 2x Anamorphot as opposed to 1.33, is they call it the 2x Anamorphot 50. Which means it's supposedly for 50mm lenses. Now, it's actually for 50mm lenses on an APS-C crop. One of the big differences I find with this Anamorphot, apart from the fact that it's a 2x stretch, is the size of the taking lenses you could use. On a full frame, the widest lens you can use, if I'm not mistaken, is a 85, maybe a 75, somewhere around there. On an APS-C, you can use a 50. Which means on a GH4 you can use a 35. Now, having that much of a difference in what taking lenses you can use affects how wide you can have that image. You know, one of the things that I love about anamorphic, but apart from the flare and the bokeh stretch, is actually that bend, that curve, and I like that on a wide lens. That's going to be tricky to get if you're shooting with a full frame lens, because your options of lenses, the widest you can use is around an 85 or a 75 or something like that. That doesn't give you much room. You're basically using a telephoto lens and adding more width on the side. So to me, that's the first thing you got to check out when it comes to using these lenses. The fact that you are limited by the type of size lenses you can use. I think that's why when I was testing out the lenses, I preferred using it with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, because using with the Blackmagic gave me much nicer images with the lenses that I had. When I was using the 2x Anamorphot with the A7S with my 85mm Canon FD 1.8, I was getting this very soft image, which I wasn't really digging, especially the top and bottom, which I found very strange. I'd get nicer images with the 50mm Carl Zeiss Sienna, but that would vignette around the sides, and I'd try and crop that out to get a 235 image. So that was kind of tricky, as opposed to when I'm using with the Blackmagic, I have it here with a 35mm together with a focal reducer, and the widest lens I've used with it on a Blackmagic pocket camera is a 24mm f2.8 Canon FD. The thing is, I'm talking a lot about things that you can't do, or lenses that might not go well with it, but the fact of the matter is that it is a 2x stretch, and I do like the look of that image. It's a very different look compared to a 1.33. The bokeh just stretches out insanely. You get much more of a curve when you manage to find a lens that's wide enough. You get a very, very unique look. And one thing that I really do like about the 2x compared to 1.33 is the way it flares. It does flare a little bit more organically. The 1.33 had a very clinical blue, sharp line, whereas the 2x, it's got a little bit more of an organic feel to it. It breaks up a little bit more. To me, it's a lot more visually, aesthetically pleasing compared to the 1.33. That being said, when you have a 2x stretch on a 16:9 sensor, things get ridiculously wide. If I'm not mistaken, the ratio is 355 to 1, 3 something to 1. It's wide. And it's not something that you could use all the time. There are people that have managed to use that super wide stretch and use it very well. The one that sticks to mind is an advertisement that Singapore Marina Bay Sands did starring David Beckham, which is shot on a 2x stretch anamorphic lens. I'm not sure which anamorphic lens they're using, but it's very obviously a 2x stretch, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. But again, it's also an image that, you know, you never know whether someone can really use. And that being said as well, you can always just take that image and then just chop off the sides. I did some footage on the A7S with a 50mm and then chopped off the sides to see if I could get a 235 image that was usable. And for the most part, I could. Now, another one of the things that SLRMagic did, as I was testing out this lens, they also sent me something else a little while after that, called the SLRMagic Rangefinder. Now, this made things a little bit more interesting, because one of the issues that I had with both anamorphic lenses, but even more so with the 2x, was focusing. I did find it very, very hard to focus and get focus in nice and correct. Now, what the rangefinder does is it attaches onto the anamorphic lenses, and then it allows you to just focus everything on the front. So you set your taking lens to infinity, and then just focus everything over here up to a distance of 3.5 feet. Now that makes things a lot easier in terms of trying to find your focus, trying to frame a shot. You know, not double focusing using the normal near ring over here together with the focusing over here, which can make things a little bit tough. And it's also designed so that it can fit on the 1.33 as well. And if you have other anamorphic projection lenses that have a front thread, or you have a way of attaching a front thread, 77mm thread, you can just attach this on and then focus straight away and be done with it, which is a pretty cool and ingenious idea. The only annoying thing maybe which happens with that is, number one, if you're going to put an ND filter, you're going to need an 82mm filter. Because that's the size of the front thread. Your front thread suddenly becomes a lot bigger. And it also makes the lens a lot bigger again. But, you know, it's a trade-off. At least with this, you manage to be able to focus things a little bit better. Now, in order to really test out this lens, I had a short film called Kill Wish, released by Doghouse Pictures on YouTube. And I asked them whether I could shoot the entire short film in this with a 2x anamorphic in that full stretch, because I just wanted to see how tricky it is to tell an entire story when you have that wide an image. And it was also a great way to real world test the lens. With the 1.33, I was shooting actually another Doghouse short film, and purely as a cinematographer. This time I was directing. And with the previous short film, it was on a 1.33 with a Sony FS100. Whereas with this one, I did a combination of the Blackmagic pocket camera for daytime shots and shots that I could light up, and anything that was low light at night, I was using the Sony a7S. One of the first things that I realized whilst I was shooting that short film and preparing for it was that I needed to rig this camera if I'm gonna use this lens because it is so big. There would be no way for me to just set things up with like this, just put that on a tripod and go at it because it's just too big. And the weight of this lens is putting so much weight onto the taking lens, and it's all on the filter thread, and it's just pulling down the front of the body, and you just need to figure out a way to rig it somehow with a lens support just to hold that thing up right there. To monitor, I was using a Shogun because I could de-squeeze the footage and then, you know, frame things a little bit easier. So it became this pretty big rig, and I had two rigs set up, one for the a7S, one for the Blackmagic, in order for me to shoot this short film. Straight away, like, the cool things about the lens and the limitations started popping up. The limitations being, there's quite a few scenes which are shot indoors in small rooms, and when you can't go that wide, you're pretty much stuck to everybody being in a medium shot at most, with a lot of space between them. The other thing I realized is going handheld with this lens, very, very tricky. Pretty damn tricky. And most of all, it just cemented the fact that I really like the images that I got with this lens and a Blackmagic compared to the Sony a7S. Now that is no criticism of the Sony a7S. I feel that is more of the taking lens that I had. If I had an 85 with maybe a smaller front element, maybe it would look nicer. I'm not sure. Either way, everything looked very soft at the edges with the 85mm, although it does have a kind of dreamy quality to it, I guess. The thing is with this lens is that it was also very bulky and very tedious to use. You know, we have the full camera rig, and then if we want to change lenses, we have to change everything. You know, because we have to change the taking lens. As far as the rangefinder is concerned, that was something that I would use. It depends on what I would use it for. Like, I'd use it for handheld mostly. A lot of the times when I had the shot set up, I would actually use the diopters, the SLRMagic diopters, in order for me to really lock in focus and get it nice and sharp. I would use the rangefinder, depends if I needed to. So how do I feel about this lens? That's a tricky question to answer because I like the look. You know, don't get me wrong, I really do like the look. There is something about the 2x stretch, you know, which is the usual stretch for anamorphic. There's something about that look that I will always love. It does beg the question though of like, do you want to go through all this work to get that look? I wish I could have tried this out on a GH4 so that I could shoot in 4:3 and really see the image being used to its, you know, proper potential. But using it with my cameras, it's one of those lenses where I like the look, but I don't imagine using it as much as the 1.33. You know, there are more ways that I know I can use the 1.33 and I can use it quickly. I can use it by myself. With the 2x, I feel like I need a crew. I need to set up and rig up everything. I need to have it on rails. I'm sorry, it just does not feel stable. I mean, right now, looking at this on this tripod, it does not look stable at all. It looks like I'm gonna kill the thread on this any minute now. Because this is big. This is a big setup, and the amount of stress that this is putting onto this lens, it freaks me out. So, you know, you need a lens support to hold this lens up, and you need to be patient and you need to be, you know, prepared to go through what you have to go through to use this lens. Is it just as tough as using a projection lens? No, not necessarily. Is it a lot easier? A little. It's a real shame because this lens really tears me up inside. On the one hand, it's got this really cool look, which I love. On the other hand, like, I've got to set up too much stuff to make sure that this lens is used to its full potential. So I don't know, you know, I'll let the images speak for themselves, and it's really you really need to try out the lens to know whether or not you want to use something like this. So yeah, it's hard for me to say whether or not I can recommend this lens. It really depends on what you intend to use it for and what cameras you've got. To me, it's a very cool looking lens with a very cool image. I just don't know when I'm going to use it as much as the 1.33. It retails for about 1,200 USD. I'll put down the prices somewhere on the screen somewhere. So it's not a cheap piece of kit, but it is a very cool look. So if that's what you're looking for, by all means, go right ahead. Till next time.